When you start waking up from the spell that you were brought up in, the spell that you had to be all things to everyone, you had to smile, be appropriate, be, very approachable as a woman, especially when you are in a marriage or a long term relationship. As you start doing this work to decondition or deconstruct or decenter men, even though you are married to a man, essentially, there are a lot of confronting things that are going to come up. And if you do speak up and actually find your voice and start talking about these deeper issues, deeper topics, especially if you have found that yourself falling into a role that neither of you discussed, but you kind of just fell into it, because that can happen very easily, these gender roles within the marriage, especially when it comes to parenting as well, if you have children, where you are picking up the slack, even if you work, you have the career. I mean, none of this is new stuff, but a lot of women, myself included, fall into this role of picking up the slack, taking on the emotional load, fixing everything. And you might have had experiences where you've experimented with maybe leaving the laundry unfolded or leaving the empty toilet roll on the hook, or whatever it may be, and just noting and noticing that nothing gets moved or changed unless you do the moving or the changing, and nobody seems to notice in the home. And it can be so exhausting to firstly realize that you have been the person to be doing that in your household, and also the realization of how emotionally draining it is, because as women we are constantly having to think about what's the next thing, what we're eating next, what's for dinner, what needs to go on the shopping list, is this kid okay, is that kid okay, what medicine do I need for that one, what activities do they have. And when you do not have a supportive partner or husband, then you can take that on because you have to take it on. Now, I have resisted, and probably will continue to resist, calling myself a relationship coach or a relationship mentor, purely because although we talk about relationships and relationships have a big impact on our lives and our well-being, even when I was working with women to heal from narcissistic abuse or co-parent in that space or parent their children in that space, it is all to do with relationships. It's just now, as we become more awake and more aware to really how much we are taking on, and I do truly believe that when you get to a certain age is when you start to unmask and you can take less and less and less, and you start to notice things that have just been taken along as normal that have not been normal. And it's not that your husband is the villain or that they're the bad guy and so terrible. We have a lot to answer for in terms of the roles that we fall into and happily fall into, or rather blindly fall into, until we realize, what is my life? You wake up one day and you start realizing, how did I get here? Why am I the one doing X, Y, Z? Why am I the one thinking about X, Y, Z? I do not have capacity. And I do believe that, yes, hormones are at play here, but not as an excuse. We change. We are shifting and changing. I'm going through this in real time. As we are talking about this, it's very meta. I'm going through this journey of deconstructing, decentering, deconditioning in a marriage, in a relationship. And when you are growing and expanding as a woman, it's not that you have to take on more and learn more and be more of who you are. It's more of stripping away the shit. And I say it as like unmasking. I'm not okay. I'm not going to do X, Y, Z. I'm not going to think for anyone else but myself. And it's not that you all of a sudden don't love your husband or don't love your children and don't want to be part of the family, although some people might just want to run off into the woods and, join a coven. That sounds quite enticing. But we have responsibilities, we're mothers, we're wives, whatever it may be. Now, depending on where you're at in your journey, this deconstructing can feel like you just want to blow up your life. On the one hand, you just want to blow up your life because what is my life? Like, how did I get here at 45 years old? Or how can I maintain the life that I have that isn't bad? I've just kind of woken up from this sleepy slumber, from this haze. And it can feel like you can feel very resentful of the fact that you have a life that wasn't really scripted by you. And then, along with that, as you do this unpacking and processing, is the guilt that you may feel because you do have children and you are a wife and you are, there are people who rely on you and you are in a family dynamic. So, how do you marry those two? How do you maintain who you are or rediscover who you are? Like, shed everything else that isn't you, wasn't you, and that you are no longer interested in being, and have the support of your family members and your husband in that dynamic to pick up the slack and to understand where you're at, because it can feel like maybe it's like a midlife crisis or something, or it feels like a midlife crisis, or it feels like you're having a mental break or whatever it may be. But it's also very, in my opinion, it's very freeing. Like, I was the ultimate good girl people pleaser. And as women, we are able to put up with a lot, but just because we are able to doesn't mean that we should. And I just feel like I'm unmasking, but there are so many masks because you operate in this place where I've got my shit together, I handle this, I handle this, I handle this, I handle this. It's not like your life is a mess. Your life works, but it works largely because you put a lot into it. And in that, we lose elements and parts of ourselves, which isn't fair, but it is a reality. The big challenge is, how can I be me and allow my rage to rise to the surface without pushing people away and without blowing up my marriage, unless you absolutely want to. That's entirely up to you. You will know. But there are really two things that can happen when we start deconditioning, deconstructing, and waking up from this spell, and decentering men as well. You're either going to realize that the marriage or relationship is for you because your husband or partner they're doing their own work, they're deconstructing, they are at least supportive of you on your journey. So that's one side of the coin. And the other side of the coin is, maybe it's met with disdain. Maybe they are unsupportive. Maybe they don't pick up the slack. Maybe they don't have any compassion or empathy for you, or don't really get it, or just think, well, that's what you've been doing, so what's wrong with it? That's what you do. That's your job. I don't know why you have a problem with it now. You've been doing it all this time. That is not very supportive. And I'm not here to tell anyone what to do with their lives, but if you're on this journey and you find yourself in your, midlife and feel that you have been in these roles unconsciously and you are done with it, and then you are sitting with that and shedding everything that does not belong to you, what are you left with? Are you left with a healthier, more solid sense of self and relationship as well? Or are you left with a healthier sense of self, but maybe some tough decisions to make? So that's just what I want to leave you with. Like, as we have these conversations, it takes an amount of courage to speak up, because you can go on this journey, but you can't hide the fact that you have rage, that you have anger, that you are shedding, that you are unmasking, that you are done, that you do not have capacity to hold it all anymore. Just because you have doesn't mean that you should. So I really do encourage you to look at your own life and your own situation and your own specific dynamic. And I'm not saying predict which way it's going to go, but start having these conversations, start having these discussions. There is nothing wrong with bringing things up. And there's a lot going on at the moment in the world. So there's a lot of opportunity for these conversations to come up, and just assess how you are met in that. And again, it will be very illuminating for you. And it doesn't mean you have to leave a perfectly healthy, loving relationship with a good man, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to stay either and stick with the status quo. So back to, I resisted and still resist calling myself a relationship coach. Everything we do is around our relationships, whether they are romantic or familial, whether we are parents, whether we're sisters, whatever it is. So essentially, this is about our relationships and our relationship dynamics, because it has a lot to answer as to our state, how we're feeling internally as women of a certain age, as we do this deconstructing and this deconditioning and this decentering. So I do encourage you to have these conversations and start the ball rolling. There is no right or wrong way to go about this, as long as we're not throwing around accusations, unless they're warranted. But it's just opening up the dialogue with our significant others and seeing where the chips lie. That's all I want to share for today. This was inspired by a post I did and then a comment that I received on Instagram, and it is very interesting. There's a lot more I could say, but I'm going to leave it there for today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.